Uhuru. Uhuru to everybody who's out there. We're very excited about this profound program that we are having tonight, Stop America's War on Black Men, talking about the conditions, the assault on the African community in terms of the assault on African men, which is a colonial attack on the entire African community. And again, as we do every Friday evening, we are holding this web event in support and to raise resources for the Black Power Blueprint, Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis. And I am here with Bakari Olatunji.
Uhuru.
And Jesse Neville.
Uhuru.
And we are here actually in San Francisco today. We're at the Dolores Family Services on Valencia Street in San Francisco. And we're going to be having our tour event for the Black Power Blueprint, the San Francisco tour event, a little bit later. So we want to welcome everybody here tonight. And we're very excited to have with us from St. Louis, Ticharwa Masimba of the African People's Socialist Party and Kitty Riley of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And before we go into and go over and talk to them about this very profound and serious struggle and issue, I want to say that I am Penny Hess. I'm the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which is an organization of white people who make up the organization of the African People's Socialist Party, who work in the white community under their leadership and as a front of the struggle for African liberation led by the party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela inside the belly of white power, fighting for white people's reparations to African people and genuine solidarity with the right of African people and oppressed people around the world to their own liberation, their own land, and self-determination, sovereignty, and power in their own hands. And, you know, we welcome you again to this Black Power Blueprint web event tonight on this very profound and grave subject of America's war on Black men. It is a colonial war. It is so destructive to the lives of African men that it meets the definition of genocide under international law. And as we know, an assault on the lives and functioning of African men is an assault on the entire African nation and people. So as we said, we are here in San Francisco tonight. We will be going to St. Louis in just a few minutes. We want to salute, as always, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the leader of the Uhuru movement and chair of the African People's Socialist Party. And as a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, we work under Chairman Omali Yeshitela's leadership, and it is a profound honor to have worked under his leadership for over 40 years as a member and chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. So we also want to salute Deputy Chair Ona Zanea Yeshitela, who is the powerful and brilliant coordinator of the Black Power Blueprint program in St. Louis, and who has been there for almost a year, purchasing buildings. We'll talk about what this program is. There's nothing else like it in the entire world today. It is the only program that has workers' power in the hands of the African working class. We also want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Ona Zanea, who are in Africa as we speak. They've been broadcasting from there, and I think they're going to continue to be broadcasting from South Africa, occupied Azania, when they get there in the next couple of days. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru. So I just want to say that it's an honor to participate in this webinar tonight with Bakari Olatunji and Chairwoman Penny Hess, and just want to welcome everyone for this event, which is launching phase 2 of the campaign to raise the resources for the Black Power Blueprint. And many of you who are watching contributed very generously towards phase 1, which raised $25,000 towards the new Uhuru House, which in a very short amount of time has gone from being a rundown old building into a beautiful African working class economic development institution there. And now phase 2 is focusing on demolishing the buildings right across from the Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant to make way for the community garden and the One Africa, One Nation open air marketplace, which is part of the plan to create community commerce in the African working class O'Fallon neighborhood, and $20,000 are needed to demolish those buildings and make that a reality.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. I think as many people know, the Black Power Blueprint is an incredible project led by the African People's Socialist Party, a project for political and economic power in the hands of the African working class, a program for self-government and self-determination.
Uhuru. And we have been going live with incredible web events and different kinds of issues since early December. As Jesse said, we successfully raised $25,000 from so many of you out there, just an outpouring of support from all kinds of communities supporting the Black Power Blueprint and putting it in at youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. But what this is, a part of is an overall effort to win a total of $300,000 for these and other projects that are part of what's called the Black Power Blueprint, including the renovation of the Uhuru Jiko Kitchen on Goodfellow Avenue in St. Louis. That will be the home of Uhuru Foods and Pies, a bakery, a community kitchen, a cafe, and the African Independence Workforce Program.
Yes, particularly as Africans, we salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, and to Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, who leads this amazing work. And I want to appeal to Africans in particular. You can go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, and you can donate to this great and tremendous project.
Uhuru. So tonight we ask you to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, and we want to raise $2,000 from this webinar tonight. And we know we can do this. We can do this, and we have been raising resources every week, and we'll continue to do so, because just as this system, parasitic capitalism, never stops stealing the resources and labor of African people, we have to be just as relentless in turning over those resources and paying reparations to African people. And everyone can and everyone has contributed to the Black Power Blueprint. But as a North American, as a white person, I especially want to call upon other white people to support this project as a stand of reparations to African people, returning the stolen resources after 500 years of the enslavement of African people and the theft of their labor, land, and resources that gave white people prosperity.
So tonight, we're talking about something so serious, something not discussed very often, the deadly assault on African men that is carried out on every front of their lives. This assault is based on the criminalization of African men in the media, in the schools, an assault that justifies the police murder of African men and the massive, staggering imprison rate of African men in this country. And, this week's theme was sparked by an article with chilling statistics that was published in the New York Times earlier this week. The article was titled, "Extensive Data Shows Punishing Reach of Racism for Black Boys." And this is a report on a long-term study of 20 million children in the US born between 1978 and 1983, so that they're in their late 30s or maybe just turning 40 now on the average of this 20 million slash of children that were born at that time. And the report found that African boys, even those who grow up in rich neighborhoods and in families where the fathers and or mothers are millionaires, fall into poverty and face arrest and prison at rates far higher than white boys who grow up even in lower middle class neighborhoods and economic situations.
As African people, we've suffered from colonialism for hundreds of years, but for me, this article comes to the conclusion that this data proves that racism proves that the issue for African men is not class, but as they say, quote unquote, racism. As we in the Uhuru movement correctly understand from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the political theory of African internationalism, that the problem is colonialism. the political and economic repression and exploitation of a whole people by state power of the oppressor nation.
This study also says that African girls raised in wealthy families grow up to be women who financially do as well or even better than white women raised in wealthy families. Now, that doesn't mean African women are not being affected by colonialism, because obviously there are many, many ways African women are under assault by colonialism. What it shows is that there's a concerted effort to assault and destroy the African community by assaulting African men at all economic echelons.
Yeah, and this also means that the African petty bourgeoisie, or the wealthier class, does not have access to social wealth like white people do. Like, social wealth is wealth that is passed down from generation to generation, that, you know, we got because this country is built on the enslavement of African people and the theft of their land, which means that a huge percentage of white people are able to pass down to the next generation the ability to have a down payment on a house, or to be able to go to college and have that paid for. This is very common, even in the white, you know, even in the lower middle class community, this happens. So it's saying that the African petty bourgeoisie does not have access to that social wealth, so that somebody who, quote, made it in the African community is doing that outside of a family history and even a society as a whole that opens up resources to African people. Because the thing is that white people make sure their kids don't fall into poverty, because they give them money, and, you know, they give them houses, they give them jobs and all this kind of thing. So, you know, I think that it's going to be very, very important tonight to discuss.
And tonight we are going to raise $2,000 with your support, and we want to announce those donations as they come in. But the only way we can announce it is if you go to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint, and as soon as you're done putting in your info and making your contribution, we will get a notification and we will announce it. So if you like what you're hearing tonight and you want to do something and take action, go to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint.
Uhuru. So now I'm very excited because we're going to go to St. Louis, and we're going to bring in from the African People's Socialist Party the outstanding speaker and leader there locally, Ticharwa Masimba, who has been on the ground at the Black Power Blueprint sites at the Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant for months and months and months, under the leadership of Deputy Chair Zinaya Shatella, transforming that building in the thick of it, speaking about it, explaining it. And we're also going to be speaking to Kitty Riley, a member of the leadership of the African People's Solidarity Committee and former school teacher in the public schools, who has been working on the Black Power Blueprint projects, also under the leadership of Deputy Chair Zinaya Shatella. So Uhuru.
We did get our first donation.
We're going to announce our first donation, and we're going to say Uhuru to Ticharwa and Kitty.
Uhuru. So first, just want to salute Bobby Wittenberg, who went to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint and donated $50 towards our
All right, Uhuru, Bobby, one of our greatest donors. We really appreciate you, comrade. Uhuru. So I'm very excited to welcome Ticharwa Masimba from St. Louis. Uhuru, can you hear me?
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Hear you.
And Kitty. So just want to open it up to you. And
yeah, I'm happy to be a part of this event. This is an important article, and it requires for us to sum it up. It gives some real telling facts, you know, showing that irrespective of wealth, irrespective of education, irrespective of whether you have a two-parent household, all the things that we are taught are necessary to quote unquote make it in this society, that you cannot pass anything on to your children. So it just lays out a bunch of factual information that's difficult to dispute. It says that a black man raised by two parents together in the top 10% of wealth, making at least $140,000 a year, will earn about the same as a white male raised by a single mother in a lower middle class household, showing that there is no stability for African people, even those who make it, because there, as Penny said, there's no social wealth held in the African community. And that African men are particularly under assault regardless of class. The article also shows that 1 out of every 5 African men raised in the bottom 1%, that is the most impoverished in the U.S., will go to prison in his lifetime. And that on any given day, an African born in the upper class will also be in prison in this country at about the same rate as a white male and who grew up in a lower middle class household. It says that African children make up about 35% of all children in the most impoverished 1% of the United States. It shows that African people have the lowest median income in the United States, and that we are the poorest, even poorer than indigenous Americans by a whole $10,000, which was shocking to me. So it just really brings out the fact that many African children will grow up without a father, and they attribute that to the downward mobility that they identify. But the problem with this article is that it does not bring all the factors into play. It does not, as Bakary said, it doesn't discuss colonialism, which we understand as the core contradiction in this social system. So, the article looks at wealth, it looks at education, it looks at income, it looks at 2-parent households, and how do you explain all of these symptoms and how they impact African people, and in this case, African men. And we say that you have to get to the root cause. You have to understand that there is a core contradiction. And they identify that as racism in the article, and that's incorrect. We say it's colonialism. We say at the root of all of these symptoms is the fact that you have one group of people who live off of the land, the labor, and the resources of another group of people. And that is a fundamental contradiction. So even if I can acquire wealth and I can bring my child into a 2-family household and we can live in the upper 10%, even if we have education, we cannot pass anything on to our children because we don't possess power. So we cannot guarantee a future for our children, even if we've managed to make it. So this article calls it racism, but we say it's colonialism. We say it's a political system that is undergirded by what we call the state, which is the police and the courts. And so that is something that it also needs to talk about, right? Because there are 2.2 million people in prison, 3/4 of which are African and Mexican. That's 2.2 million people in prison in this country, 3/4 of which are African and Mexican. When you add those people who are waiting for trial or on parole or probation, then you're looking at a total of 6.8 million people involved in the prison system. Take it a little further, if you include the people who are coming in and going out of the prison system on a yearly basis, you're looking at upwards of 11 million people rotating in and out of the prison system in this country. That is astonishing. But social symbol status that you look at, whether you're looking at wealth, whether you're looking at education, the amount of parents in the household, if you look in the prison system, you see every social indicator, African people are on the bottom and other oppressed people. So this requires an explanation. It also shows that we also know that when African men come out of prison, they come out unable to find work, and 35% of all unemployed people are African men. 35% of all unemployed people in this country are African men. And even in 11 states, African men make up 1 out of every 5 persons in prison. So I just think this is astonishing. I think that it really shows us that it is really an issue of power, because no matter what you do in this lifetime, you cannot guarantee a future for your children. And I think it really calls on us to examine this quest that most of us are taught to make to solve all of our own personal contradictions. So, we want to figure out how to make a certain amount of money. We want to figure out how to be able to go on vacation, have a certain lifestyle. And we assume that we are contributing to the future of our children when we do so. But this article demonstrates that that is not the case for African people, and especially for African men. There's just no correlation there. The other thing that we really wanted to point out was that we have to look at some of the significant factors in what we see here, particularly when we talk about what's happening in the prison system. We know that in the 1960s, African people rose up and were leading a revolution, so much so that the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover identified the Black Panther Party as the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States since the Civil War. And so the response by the FBI and the CIA was to, one, put heroin and crack cocaine into the African community. And it was not just the counterinsurgency in terms of drugs, but it was a counterinsurgency that impacted Black leadership, that targeted Black organizations, but also targeted the African community in general. And so the so-called war on drugs was really a counterinsurgency war to ensure that African people would never have the capacity to resist in the way that we did in the 60s. So we have to understand that there's a relationship here, a material relationship where one people are living off of the land, labor, and resources of another people. And that is what is the core contradiction here. So, that's really what we wanted to point out. We wanted to turn it back over to Penny so that she can pick it up. But, the other thing is we really want to call on people to address this contradiction, that we are fundamentally a colonized people, and that the only solution for us to live is to liberate African people everywhere. We call on you to join the African People's Socialist Party, the vanguard of the revolution. And we say, Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru Ticharwa, thank you so much for what a powerful presentation. And I know that you're going to be on a little bit longer, and really want to be able to discuss with you more. I just really want to say that, as a person from the white community, that I totally unite with with your analysis. First of all, that this is colonialism. It's a political and economic system that is about a whole nation of people, the oppressor nation, participating in the oppression of the oppressed. That it's not just an abstract state out there, that this would not happen 1 second without the unity of the white population in this country, and that it is this colonialism, this sitting on a pedestal of the oppression, the enslavement of African people, the assault on Africa, the theft of Africa's resources, the genocide of the indigenous people of this land. Without that, white people would not have social wealth, would not have the ability to have wealth and property go down from generation to generation, that this comes at the expense of African people. And that it is our responsibility from the white community to pay reparations to African people. And that's what we're calling on people in the white community to do tonight. I'm a member of, very much have the honor of being a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party, with the mandate to go into the white community to organize other white people like ourselves to recognize this truth, and that the conditions that Ticharwa was talking about tonight did not just happen by in some lofty place that doesn't have anything to do with us, that we have a direct relationship to these conditions every single day, and we have the ability to close our eyes to it, to ignore it, to turn our back to it, to walk right over it, the bodies of the African people, and yet our livelihood, our ability to have our every dream and aspiration comes at the expense of this condition, and these conditions of colonialism and a system that can only exist by sucking the blood of African people and the people on the planet Earth. I wanted to just also say, I mean, these statistics were really, really incredible, that in general, I just want to put out a few more statistics, that African men have 3 times higher chance than white men to be killed by the police. And an African is killed by police every 18 hours in this country. The fact that homicide is the greatest cause of death for young African men, and homicide from what we call horizontal violence, that is colonialism, because it has always been the strategy of colonialism to divide and rule, divide and conquer. And that is exactly what they do. They set up sectors of the African community against each other, give resources to some and not to others, and keep the African community so deeply impoverished that people have to scramble for the basic resources to put food on the table. That creates a situation of horizontal violence. It is still the state, it is still the police, it is still this government that is responsible for those murders of all these young men that we see in Chicago and Oakland and other places. And then there is the whole question of even driving while black. When pulled over for speeding, black drivers are 20% more likely than white drivers or Latino drivers, and Latino drivers 30% more likely than whites to be ticketed. Black and Latino drivers are about twice as likely to be searched as compared to whites. I just also wanted to mention another chilling article that was in the New York Times that says, again, that for every 100 African women in the US of childbearing age, there are only 83 African men in normal, in the community. And so it's saying that there's at least 1.5 million African men, quote, missing in this country, missing. They're not missing, they're in prison, or they've been murdered by the police, or murdered even in horizontal violence, which is another way that the police kill young African people today. And it also pointed out in this article that was in the New York Times that it said that that in Ferguson, Missouri, where Mike Brown was murdered by the police in 2014, and his body was left on the street for 4 hours, that in that particular city, there are only 60 men for every 100 African women of childbearing age. That's how many have been killed or put into prison. This is the reality of colonialism. So, I just really wanted to call on, especially others from the white community, to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, to go ahead and pay your reparations, to contribute to this project, because this is a project that will turn these conditions around, that will put power in the hands of the African community, economically, but also politically. Things like the Black Community Control of the Police Program, or the Black People's Grand Jury, or the Tribunal on Reparations for African People. This is part of the political and economic power, dual and contending power, that the party is building through this Black Power Blueprint, which is such a powerful, powerful, powerful program. So we're calling on you to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. Whatever you can put in today, go ahead and put it in. Go ahead and put it in. This is an investment from us, from the white community, in the future of the world, the future of the ability of African people to be free, to be liberated, to to have their genius and their labor and their resources go to the benefit of the entire African population, not just to capitalism or some white person's profit. That we're going to see the flowering of genius of African workers just unleashed when we see freedom and liberation for African people and power in their hands. And we will see an end to this horrible, brutal, violent society and social system that we live in, that the party calls parasitic capitalism. So, Bakri, did you have anything that you wanted to say right now?
Well, I just think I want to call African people, as I said before, please go to www.ucaring/Black Power Blueprint. It's a way that we uphold the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and what he has contributed, given an analysis and understanding that can't be disputed, a way to lift African people up out of this constant degradation, this constant demoralization we see in our community, to give us an example through this Black Power Blueprint project of what we can do based on what we are doing. And we're going to do this, but we really want Africans to really look at this project, to really look at giving and going to the website that I talked about to be able to contribute. It's a material need for the African community, and we need to support this. This is truly where African people can support the struggle for Black power in a very material basis.
So I want to be able to go back to St. Louis, and I wanted to, us to talk to Comrade Kitty Riley, who's a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and who was a school teacher in the I think the Oakland Public Schools and the St. Petersburg, Florida Public Schools.
We have some announcements.
Oh yes. Oh, I didn't know we had some announcements. How exciting. Before we go to you, Kitty, we have some announcements.
All right, so I want to give a shout out to an anonymous donor who did $50 at ucaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, as well as Casey Mackey in St. Louis, who did $10. So that brings us to $110 so far. And you can add to that by going to ucaring.com/Black Power Blueprint so we can get to our $2,000 goal tonight.
Whoa, and $2,000 is nothing. So yes, Kitty Riley, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, Uhuru.
Okay, yeah, so we wanted to go ahead and tell us about the assault on African children, the school to prison pipeline, which is a real thing that funnels young African children into the prison system, the colonial prison system, and is part of the statistics and reality that we're talking about tonight. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you very much, Penny. And I really want to salute you and Bakri and Jesse for this webinar, and appreciate that you are coming from California, which has quite startling statistics itself. And I also want to really appreciate and salute Ticharwa Masimba for his leadership here in St. Louis, and Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, because I know for myself it has been a profound experience, really a life-altering experience to be here in the city of St. Louis at this particular time when the African working class, under its organizational leadership, is actually transforming every single day the material conditions for the Black community in St. Louis, which are really devastating, like worse than anything one sees about Detroit and the destruction of Detroit. You don't very often see about St. Louis, where 3 to 5 houses on every single block have no windows, doors, bricks down, no roofs. It's a real destruction of the African community, and houses left abandoned and no resources coming to North St. Louis, where the Black community lives, since actually the plan was laid out in 1944 and then reestablished in 1970s to take every bit of the funds, municipal, city, federal, and feed 3 white communities that now are as wealthy looking as areas of San Francisco and Berkeley, California, perpetuating a white lifestyle on the pedestal of oppression of African people. And, when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, which is an expression that refers to the criminalization of Black students in the schools and Black students being pushed out of the schools, you have to really look at some of the conditions laid out in this article, that African children in Africa and in the US go to bed hungry every night. That's from day one. The assault that results in African children in prison begins really at birth. And I can't really give statistics without saying that it is through the leadership of Omali Yeshitela and the brilliant theory and the science that he brought in analyzing society that allows us to actually see these isolated statistics are part of colonial reality, because the schools represent passing on the ideology of those who are in rule. And if you look at a social, political, and economic system that was founded on the enslavement of African people, the African slave trade, the free labor for hundreds of years, the destruction of the indigenous, communities and life and people through the genocide, near genocide of the indigenous people and theft of their land, so that we as white people could finally get a farm, having left the oppression of Europe, then that makes more sense then, because it's a colonial ideology that is perpetuated and reinforced in the schools and the philosophy that's taught. So then when we say, that as early as preschool, Black boys are more likely to be disciplined in school, than other children. And in California, 6% of Black boys in kindergarten to third grade last year were suspended or expelled. That is why. And I certainly have witnessed it myself going in, bringing in children from the, going into the regular classrooms, special ed teacher. So when you enter, you can actually see the reality of the actual curriculum. Going into a preschool, taking preschool kids into a kindergarten and seeing white teachers that were visibly hostile to the African children and the African boys, and forcing them to sit in a circle and sing Barney, that stupid show that was on TV that might placate and idealize us as white children, was just offensive to African children. They're squirming around. They don't want to sit down. They pull the hoods over their heads and being demanded to sit, listen, and sing. Something that is absolutely irrelevant to children that really want to play with an abacus and have intellectual capabilities way beyond that and want to be stimulated intellectually. And they're being repressed right there from preschool, kindergarten, all the way up. And, so 6% of Black boys in kindergarten, third grade, being suspended and expelled, that is outrageous. And, the San Francisco Chronicle had an article that said 400 Black students across California are suspended from school for behavioral infractions, typically sent home to serve their sentence.
Yeah.
Up to 68,000 days of schools missed.
Yes.
Mostly African boys. African boys are the target of the hostility, and to be suppressed. And, in Florida, while teaching in Florida, they have certain levels of discipline. One is the alternative behavioral classroom. And, most Black children are suspended for willful, what they call willful behavior. It's an infraction. They resist. It's really resistance.
Yes.
They have no respect for the colonizer. It is resistance, and they call it willful behavior. So they have this thing called the ABC classroom, where you're sent, before you can, you're suspended or expelled. And it's alternative behavior classroom, but all the Africans in the movement called it the all Black classroom.
Right.
And literally, if you look in the door any given day, it'd be about 99%, children, and mostly boys. And you are just given what they call busy work. So you're pulled out of the classroom, you're given busy work. You can't eat lunch in the lunchroom when the other children eat. You're lined up like you are from prison cell into the cafeteria. When lunch is over, everything is the school to prison pipeline. And also, I mean, there's so many. There's also what they call the OSIT. It's a behavioral program for a week. That's the next level, and it's really psychological.
Wow.
It's actually not even based on educational materials, but counseling. It's like a psychological assault on African children. There's paper put up on all these classroom windows. The same with the one called emotionally handicapped. I mean, frankly, when I went to school for special ed, inspired by my aunt, it was children with physical limitations, and you were trying to reach, you know, the brilliant brain behind some of those physical limitations. And then you get into teaching, and it's all about, special ed is all about designating African children, you know, as not normal. And then they come up with emotionally handicapped. Mm-hmm. And they have levels of discipline, you know, level A, level B, level C, level D, and you get put into level D. You have to sit in the corral in the room. There's paper on the windows, which is, you know, sensory deprivation. This is in a classroom, or, you know, those add-on classrooms that they have notoriously for special ed and African children. And and these kids are furious. They're angry. They're not getting a stimulating education. It's just behavior modification all day long. And if you do all this right, you go from level D to level C. Then you go from level C the next week or 5 days later to level B, or level A, and then integration into the room. No other children can talk with you when you're in these levels, right, in the same classroom. And that was in Florida. And of course, Florida has Norwood, the lockup room. I witnessed a thing in 3rd grade. You know, there is a zero tolerance, you know, for drugs or weapons in most of the public schools, certainly in Florida. And a 3rd grade, you know, North American white boy came into class and he had a knife in his backpack that other children saw. That is zero tolerance for a weapon. And he's brought right up to the office, then brought back. He's all crying. And the teacher actually absolved him. Even though it's zero tolerance, the white teacher absolved it. Completely had it as a report in her desk. I saw a gym teacher came to me and told me, it was witness anyway, but she came to me and told me she did a takedown on a 3.5-year-old child who would not cooperate and go into another yard playground in the sand. I just, you know, really outrageous, not just treating the African community as the other, the way the colonizing population treats the colonized. And, you know, another article said, you know, 16% of Black students suspended or expelled, sometimes, you know, through K to 12, compared to 5% of white children. I mean, that just shows, because while the white child was exonerated because the white teacher can identify with the other child in the same school that was seen in his backpack, like a prescription, his uncle's prescriptions. You know, it's a prescription bottle, probably for high blood pressure or something. And he just thought it was kind of cute, and he brings it to school. It's in his backpack, and he's showing kids or whatever. He was sent to Norwood, which is a whole school, for 6 months. It's a whole school that is really based on a prison-style model. And for 6 months, and he kept saying, well, I was only joking around. I thought it would be great. And actually, he was a brilliant artist, this child, and I thought, that's it. They are preparing. He will be doing his art in prison someday, because all the statistics show that the children that are suspended from these articles, you know, and expelled Black and Indigenous children, Mexican, you know, what they call Latino, you know, is like 61% are Black and Latino. And in the prisons, it correlates to the population that is incarcerated, which is 70% Black and Latino. It's a direct correlation, and children that were never taken out of the classroom setting were hardly ever saw prison in their lifetime. So that shows the correlation, and it's just outrageous. I mean, Florida, it's 39% are Black students that are expelled when African students only account for 23% of the population, which means they are expelling more and more of the same students, just keep repeatedly getting suspended and expelled. And across all United States public schools, 18% are Black students across the United States, but comprise of 40% of all students that are expelled. They're
Wow.
3 times more likely to face suspensions and expulsions.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to find it intolerable from the white community.
Yes.
We have to donate to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, because this is what I observed from becoming a teacher in 1968. And it has only gotten worse because colonialism is still in force. It has nothing to do with improving racism. I unite with what Ticharwa is saying. We have to give reparations that go to fund the Black Power Blueprint, which is the most positive vision and project that is happening in this country today. It is inspiring people from all over the world, in which based on African self-determination, and white people giving reparations. How else will this ever be able to happen? The resources are not in the African community. They are taken from the African community to benefit our community. This is where we can make a difference, a true expression of integrity and a principled relationship to the African community. And I myself am going to donate $50 and go to youcaring.com/Black Power.
All right, Kitty, that was really powerful. We're going to be back with both you and Ticharwa in just a minute. We have some announcements to make of people who have paid reparations tonight and given donations. So here's Jesse.
Yes, Uhuru. So I just want to, again, also appreciate Kitty's amazing presentation, and also shout out to Kitty for your $50 contribution of reparations towards the Black Power Blueprint. And Kitty is joined by Judy Weinacht, who donated $50.
Judy! Judy! Uhuru!
We also have another anonymous contribution of $50. So shout out to whoever you are, anonymous.
Uhuru!
Johan Bedingfield in Largo, Florida, donated $25 and made the statement, "White men and all white people owe reparations to African men and all African people." Uhuru. Uhuru Johan. And we have a contribution of $60 from Janet Calcaterra in Boston, who says, "White solidarity with African community control of the education system and the police." Uhuru from Boston. Right on. And I also forgot to read a statement from KC. "Stop the U.S. war on the African community. This is the project that will put power in the hands of the African community to liberate themselves from the horrors of this vicious social system." So with that, we are currently at $345 towards our goal of $2,000.
All right, and I'm going to put in $55 tonight, and that brings us to $400.
Yes.
Pardon me?
Uhuru.
Uhuru. I'm so excited because I love it when we actually raise these resources for the Black Power Blueprint. When just regular people go ahead and take this on and saying, yes, I can't stand to hear these statistics. I agree with this analysis of African internationalism. This system makes me sick. I do not want to live my life with blinders and rose-colored glasses on. I don't want to be able to live in business as usual while African people are dying, while Mexican people are dying, while indigenous people do not even have their own land. That we have to change the world. And that as white people, we have a responsibility and ability to be part of this. We can't look at these statistics and just walk away. We have access to social wealth. We have to turn it over. We also have to win more and more and more people. We have some really powerful comrades giving reparations. We have to win new people as well. We have to win the people who are just going to sit there and put in $1,000 tonight, who are going to go ahead and bring us to to the $20,000 that we need to raise. So I just really want to say that we have to go ahead and put the resources in. Bakri, you have anything that you want to say?
Well, I really appreciate Penny's presentation and the powerful words of what Ticharwa had to say, because the thing is, we as Africans suffer from colonial violence. We've been suffering from it for hundreds of years. And the statistics, to me, bring science to what we already know through the pain and the suffering. And that makes it even more important that we do this Black Power Blueprint, because it puts the power back in the hands of the African working class community. That is why I want to call out to the African community, please go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. We have to be about forwarding and solving the problems of colonialism. We can spend forever talking about the problems that we know are there, which are not racism, but in fact colonialism. And what we want to do is to provide a blueprint of what we can do everywhere in every African community throughout the planet. And that is one reason why we do this Black Power Blueprint. And we really want people to go again to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint and give generously. And we can move this project forward the way it needs to be moved.
Uhuru. Uhuru, Jesse. Do we have any more announcements?
Not yet.
Uh-oh. We've got to get out there. We've got to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. Go ahead and give. Go ahead and put it on your credit card. This is Friday. This is payday. We need to go ahead and put it in. Just take it right off the top. Just put it back in. That's reparations. I want to do my part. I want to change the world. I'm not going to leave this situation for another generation. And it's only the African working class that can lead. I think we have to come a little bit closer together here. That can lead this struggle. That African people are coming forward with their own narrative, telling the story from their point of view, from their eyes. That's what African internationalism is about. It's seeing the world through the eyes of the oppressed African working class. I am an African internationalist under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. I don't want to see the world through the eyes of white power. I want to see the world as it is experienced by the majority of humanity. And I want to take that as a mandate that until the day I die, I will struggle that this white power system has to come down, and that African people and oppressed people must have control over their lives and over their resources.
Well, I want to throw in a $20 contribution today towards the Black Power Blueprint. So that brings us to $420. I'm just making a note of that.
420.
420.
All right, we've got a ways to go, but we have another hour.
Yes. And I just want to encourage every white person who's watching this to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. And all right, here we go. D. Batiste, $100.
All right, Diane, I think it is.
Yes.
Uhuru. Wow, that's fantastic.
Hey,
That brings us to $520.
Uhuru.
About a quarter of the way, a little over a quarter of the way towards our goal of 2,000. And please interrupt me with more donations. As soon as you go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint, I will get a little text message here and I will announce it to our great audience there tonight.
Yeah, we want to thank Comrade Jackson, who's out there sending us the text messages. So, Uhuru, just make Jackson work. Make him work hard. All right, I just really appreciate this discussion and how deep this is. You know, I mean, no, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's reality. This is what this system does.
Yep.
They have high-level conferences and plan how they're going to do this. The fact that, you know, they used to call the Soviet Union the Gulag because they had all these people in these prisons in Siberia. No, they had nothing. No, not even a tiny percentage of their population in prison, as we do inside the borders of the United States, the largest prison population in the entire world. And Africans are in these sensory deprivation units, in lockdown. Some of the African freedom fighters who were put in prison during the 1960s and 70s have been in solitary confinement for 40 years. 50 years. And I mean, it's incredible. We live in a barbaric, horrible, violent system. And that we can't make peace with this as white people. We have to take this on. I would really like to ask you, Ticharwa, to tell us a little bit more about the conditions in St. Louis. That I know you grew up there, you are part of the African community there, and just tell us about what African men and the African community experiences in St. Louis, in particular, where it's said that the greatest gap in the whole country between the number of African men and African women is in Ferguson, where Mike Brown was murdered. So tell us a little bit about the conditions that you face, that you know, and that you are working to overturn through the Black Power movement.
All right, Uhuru, Penny, thank you. Yeah, I was born and raised just a few blocks from where the Uhuru house that we are building as part of the Black Power blueprint is occurring, just a couple of blocks away. And I experienced nearly everything that Kitty described in the school system in St. Louis. I was targeted in the 3rd grade when I had a teacher call my mother in the 3rd grade and tell my mother that she was afraid of me because of the way I was looking at her. And when you talk about open hostility, especially when you get middle school and you start going into high school, I experienced a serious aggression from white teachers as part of the desegregation program. I was placed into a special ed school. So you name it, I experienced it. So it's very real. We are targeted. And as you said, there's a direct correlation there between Africans treated this way and those who end up in prison. But I left St. Louis for a while. And as much as the colonial conditions existed there before I left, like they do everywhere in the world, when I came back, I noticed something different. This was after 2008. When we had a Black president. I came back home to the block I was raised on where my mother and father still lived. And all of a sudden we had all of these abandoned buildings.
Wow.
As bad as it was. Before I left, I come back and we have all of these abandoned buildings, and I can look at these buildings and I can tell you the families that live there, only 5 or 10 years earlier. So it is said that African people lost over 50% of whatever wealth that we have in the 7-year span between 2005 and 2012. 50% of the wealth that we had lost in 7 years. So when you look at that, and you look at the fact that the facts given in this article, that irrespective of the amount of wealth that you may hold, irrespective of the level of education you may have attained, irrespective of whether you are able to raise a child in a 2-parent household, you cannot guarantee any future for your child. You can't guarantee it. You have no reasonable assurance even that the child that you raise, that you work so hard to acquire all these things for, will ever have a future. And in fact, their only future is to end up poor. And in fact, the article showed that there are more like that a child born in wealth, in the top 10% in African male, it is least likely that he will become wealthy versus all of the other socioeconomic categories. Mm-hmm. So you have, rich, upper income, upper middle class, lower middle class, and poor, and it's actually rich is the least likely category that he will fall into. In fact, they are much more likely than any white male to become imprisoned, to be pulled over, to be searched, to be ticketed, to be murdered by the police. We've seen all of this. So this was the reality that I grew up in. I didn't have to see these statistics to know this already, But through African internationalism, what I can now do is sum this up in a way that helps me understand my reality.
Mm-hmm.
To make sense of all of these various symptoms that seem to have no solid core explanation other than racism.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that racism is just the ideas in white people's heads. It is just a justification for colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and when we say colonialism, we use this term, but we often don't define it. And people have a sense of what it is, but we say colonialism is the social, economic, and political domination of a people by a foreign people.
Yes.
And that is our basic reality, is that we are a colonized people. So if we want to bring that out of the abstract, let's look at gentrification, right? Gentrification is not just white people being mean to black people. Gentrification is a process where after African communities have already been looted to such an extent that now the property value is driven down, the population is driven out. Now it becomes opportunistic for white people who left earlier to now come back in to seize all the land, seize all the property, and to do it at our expense. So they're buying homes, even when they don't want to live there, they're buying homes. Why? Because they retire off of the income that they're able to charge us. So gentrification is a local manifestation of colonialism.
Yes.
What people call developers, they're the colonizer. The people who are, those of us who are the tenants, who are made to work for this class of people, are colonized people. So the Black Power Blueprint is a strike against gentrification. It is a strike against colonialism. And it is important because you see some people, I had one person tell me where, you should go see this group over here. They're doing exactly what you're doing. You two need to work together. And that's great. We do need to work together, but there's a difference between what you see with the Black Power Blueprint and what you will see anywhere else. We have a strategy for the liberation of African people with an understanding that we are a colonized people. We are people whose land, labor, and resources are dominated by a foreign power, and we have to take it back or we have no future. That is what we understand.
Yes.
So that's what our struggle is for. We are struggling to create what we call dual and contending power. We understand that there is no way to reconcile this relationship we have with the colonizer. And so we're struggling to be able to compete for power. And the Black Power Blueprint gives us the ability to do that by creating concrete institutions. The Uhuru House, the One Out, which is a community center and a rental facility, and our offices, which will allow us to bring the community and politics back to North St. Louis. We have the One Africa, One Nation marketplace, which will allow us to bring economic commerce back to North St. Louis. We have the Uhuru Jiko Commercial Kitchen, which will train people to develop skills in the food industry, allow us to grow our own food, to provide jobs and provide a commercial space for people who need it. So this is part of a strategy for our liberation and to overturn this system that cannot provide a future for us. Uhuru.
Uhuru, that's beautiful. Thank you. That is the future that I want to be part of. I despise white power. I despise living at the expense of somebody else. I really think that what an incredible world that is going to be when African people have power. And that's why the Black Power Blueprint is electrifying. People love it. It makes people happy because they love seeing oppressed people take power over their lives and to be able to create a society and a community in their own interest. I know we have some, we have some amazing more.
I got some exciting news for everybody.
Okay, great.
So the following people have gone to ucaring.com/Black Power Blueprint and contributed towards this project today, the Black Power Blueprint. Beginning with $50 from Betty Soto.
Whoa, Betty! Uhuru!
And Betty wrote, "The only way to win is to build our own. Black Power Blueprint is real."
Uhuru. Solidarity and reparations. Black Power Blueprint.
We also have a $20 contribution of reparations from Comrade Marissa Laufer in Seattle, Washington, which just held a very successful event to build support for the Black Power Blueprint.
Yes, and Marissa kicked ass.
Yes, she did.
She was so great. She really brought the people out for that. That was powerful. And Bakri was up there as well.
Yes, and Marissa says, end the war in the African community. Long live the African Revolution. White reparations to African people. And then we have a $200 donation, reparations from Janice Cant.
All right, Uhuru, Janice Cant, wow.
So that is very powerful, very, very powerful. And people should be like Janice and donate $200 if you can towards the Black Power Blueprint, ucaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. And we also have a $50 donation from Amanda.
Wow.
So that brings us to $840 towards our goal of $2,000 for the Black Power Blueprint tonight.
Wow, we are getting there. I just really want to salute everybody who gave tonight. Wow, that is so powerful. That is very, very powerful. And we're going to make this goal tonight. We want to get to, I think we've been at 20. Oh, we got
no, Jackson clarifies that was Amanda Carlozzi from Boston.
Oh, Amanda, okay. All right, and I know that Anonymous has given quite a bit tonight. And
yes,
we
thank you,
appreciate
Anonymous.
That.
It might be more than one Anonymous.
There might be. We don't know how many.
Yeah.
So if you, all those Anonymous out there, go ahead and give tonight. So I wanted to really just, first of all, salute Ticharwa and Kitty Riley. And I wanted to ask Bakri, do you have any other comments or things that you want to add? Well, I know you worked in a hospital, in Highland Hospital in Oakland, and you worked in San Quentin Prison as a medical worker.
Yes.
So many different, you worked in jails, and you worked in Alameda County Jail, and so many different situations. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what you see about the conditions of African people and African men?
Yeah, it was actually shortly before I came in contact with the Uhuru movement. And I remember working at San Quentin Prison, and the conditions were just mind-blowing for me, because when I went into that particular vocation and that job there, I had an image of prison and, African people much different than what the reality was when I got there. I remember growing up, and you always saw prison as these older men, hardened criminals and stuff. I got there, I saw young Africans, 18 to 25 years old, serving 25 to life. I saw Africans on death row. I saw the conditions in the prison. It blew me away. I must say it was a hell of a political education that I had. And the conditions, and I saw the men stand up, and the brutality of the prison system itself that inflicted not only the conditions, but the way they pitted the Africans and the Mexicans in these cages against each other to get them to fight, and then how the guards would bet and intervene with things. I mean, you can just see the stark naked brutality in these prisons, and it was no different working in the hospitals. I worked in an emergency room in a busy hospital in Oakland, and I saw firsthand how the doctors would treat the Africans and the North American or white people coming into the emergency room with life-threatening injuries, how they would sometimes gloss over things and with the Africans, and then be very detailed about things that happened. Some of the same accidents, the same type of injuries to white people that came in. You can just see the stark, naked colonialism, the colonial mentality. When African people came in there questioning the doctor and holding the doctor up against the wall, wanting to know things, they would call security to take the family out because they didn't feel like it was for them to explain that to the family as to why this person was coming into the hospital. So colonialism manifests itself in 1,000 ways. I appreciate what Ticharwa had to say, in terms of what's happening in St. Louis. He talked about how the African community in St. Louis, and listening to him, it made me think about Oakland. Oakland used to be a majority African city. The gentrification that's going on here is taking that totally away. And you see, Africans living out on the streets in these tents, living in squalor in the city of Oakland, to come in and bust it up and throw people's personal belongings away, the few items that they have from living on the streets, saying it's a health problem, and they throw away everything these people have, and they force them to move someplace else to make them nomads on the streets in the city of Oakland, where they once had homes and were proud families and parts of families. And and it plays even into what happened just a little ways from Oakland and a few days ago, where they shot this African man in the backyard of his own family's home. And these type of conditions is colonialism. Yep. And the things that I appreciate about this webinar is that you don't have this kind of discussion any place else in the world, where you can not only talk about these, but we're talking about changing the conditions. We're talking about putting power back in the hands of African people. And youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint gives us the ability to do something about it and not just talk about it. So I truly appreciate this. It's something that, people should just be a part of, and please give to youcaring.com/BlackPowerBlueprint.com.
Yeah, Bakri, I think you were telling me yesterday about when you worked at San Quentin, that you saw the burning spear in there, and that was before you were involved in this movement. You saw the burning spear being passed around. So talk about that.
Yes, I think it was 1985, if I can go back correctly, before I even knew about the Hura movement. As a medical technician, I would deliver medicine through all the cell blocks, through death row, through what they call the adjustment center, which was where they really put people there for punishment. And they really did some terrible things to people in the adjustment center. Used to hear stories about George Jackson being in the adjustment center, and about Rochelle McGee, and about a lot of the Panthers and the things that happened in San Quentin in the 70s. But there were, remember this issue of the burning spear was a black thumb getting ready to thump a North American man. And I remember that issue. It just still sticks in my head today. But that issue of the burning spear was being passed around from cell block to cell block, from cell to cell, with different inmates. They would ask me to take it to another person in another cell block or in another place. And I didn't know nothing about the newspaper, but I would pass it. But that was my first introduction to the Burning Spear newspaper, and at San Quentin Prison. But it was something that the brothers there, they read, and they would talk about it. And the genius of the African community and the stuff I saw in these prisons, the way they communicated, the way they had to go in code and communicate things to each other right in the face of the prison officials, who were just ignorant, backward North Americans, as well as Africans and Mexicans and Asians as well. But they were armed. They were arms of the state, And the thing is, Africans, the genius came out inside of there, and the people who came in the streets not politicized became politicized in the prison. And I think the Burning Spear newspaper helped to make that process happen.
Wow, that is really powerful and very moving and poignant to hear about. And I just really want to thank you, Bakri, for that. And I just wanted to say, Jesse, do we have any more announcements, or do we have any more things that you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that if you're a white person watching this, you need to go to youcaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. We are $840 towards our goal tonight, which is $2,000 of reparations towards this incredible African self-determination project. So
we only need 1,160, right? 1,160.
That is correct.
That's all.
1,160.
Yeah, somebody could put in $1,000 tonight. There's somebody out there who could. So, really want to call on that to happen.
Yes. And I just want to say that the Black Power Blueprint is something that, as you mentioned, it's something that makes people happy. It's something that actually has been referred to as the only positive thing happening on the planet. And I think that, obviously the optimistic vision of the Black Power Blueprint for the African community is undeniable. But I think it also represents an incredibly optimistic vision for white people to rectify our relationship to the rest of humanity. And that's why so many white people have supported this project. It's not charity. It's not something that you're doing for them, quote unquote. It's actually a way that we can participate in being part of a future where we don't live at the expense of anybody else. And there's nothing redeemable about this social system that we live under, the status quo that we live under. I mean, African children are being murdered by white power, being horribly treated and abused by white power in the schools. And if you're white and you send your kid to school, your kid might get shot by another white person, by another white kid. That's the social system. It's a violent social system that is predicated upon the enslavement and genocide and oppression of African people. And it breeds violence. It breeds violence even within white society itself. So why would you want to be a part? There's nothing about that to save or redeem or reform. Gun control is not going to do it, because, you know, gun control didn't stop white people from lynching African people for over 100 years at the turn of the century. It has to be social transformation. And that's what the Black Power Blueprint represents. And that's what every contribution that you make is part of getting closer to that future. It's part of making it real. So that's why I've supported this project, and that's why so many other thousands of white people have gone to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint and paid reparations to the Black Power Blueprint.
Thank you, Jesse. Really $140 to get to our milestone of $29,000 total, which is so amazing. I mean, it's so exciting. I'm just thrilled that we're able to raise these resources. And, you know, in a few weeks, we're going to be able to have what they call the reveal, the unveiling of the beautiful, beautiful state-of-the-art Uhuru House. There's going to be a whole walkthrough of it, but there's still final little details that are happening right now. And we have to wait for that. And of course we do, because we have to see the whole thing in its entirety. And I'm so excited about that. But, you know, when we think about just how the resources have been used that people have turned over to the Black Power Blueprint, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, it is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I really, really can't wait for us to be able to we'll have a whole web event just on the unveiling, the reveal that I heard Ticharwa comment, where we're going to show this incredible work. I'd like to ask Kitty Riley. I know you've been there in the building helping to do, you know, working with the volunteers and different things. Can you tell us a little bit about the finishing?
Her Penny. I have had the honor of being there since last August, when the party called on solidarity to come to St. Louis, when it became really clear that Deputy Chair Onazinee Shatella was, you know, able to acquire properties. Number one, the goal was to build the Uhuru House Community Center, a center for the community, an economic development project, a place where there could be talent shows, there could be African culture and art, and it accommodate offices for the movement. And it's a powerful center for the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement that emerged after the killing of Mike Brown, when Chairman Amalia Shatella went to St. Louis, because the community was in the most powerful resistance that this country has seen since the 1960s. And people from St. Louis just emerged as leaders of mass organization, International People's Democratic Uhuru movement. So the party wanted to also bring solidarity, because, you know, after this is a very incredible white community, it's, you know, in that they saw, it's the Midwest. Missouri was a slave state, fought to be a slave state, reactionary as all get out, and touches 8 other states. It is truly the center of the United States. And the white population was really politicized for 3 years because they saw resistance. The younger generation, the second generation that was not alive during the 1950s and 60s like I was, and they saw this incredible resistance from the African community and wanted to show their own outrage that, you know, Darren Wilson, the cop that murdered Mike Brown, was not only freed and called justifiable, but $1 million was raised for him on a social media platform by white people, giving him that money like a reward for killing an African. And there were white people just all over the place that didn't know how to channel or express their outrage and their unity with the resistance that was coming from the Black community. All they could do was run around saying Black Lives Matter because that's what the U.S. government, and Democratic Party was saying. That didn't really change the conditions of life for African people. That didn't really demand any kind of real response from us, the recipients of the kind of terror, political and economic, that is put on the African community so that our communities can develop, our children can have a vision of a future. So it's been a really powerful experience having the party here and the Uhuru movement and the Black Power blueprint, because they do really see a concrete expression of African people taking power and moving towards self-government and self-determination and freedom. And so the Uhuru Solidarity movement is really growing by leaps and bounds.
Awesome.
Here's Lewis being inspired. And it's really, really important because the question of the demonization of African men that would allow white people to close their eyes and be in denial and complicity is very, very deep in this country, where the African man has been absolutely demonized and as a basis of justifying colonialism. And it does start with the children. And it does start with Black boys, growing into men. And it goes across all other, personal circumstances. For example, even in, for the homeless population of children, Black boys were 16% more likely to be suspended in school compared to 6% of homeless children overall. So you can be an African child who's homeless and have to live with that reality and still have the furor of the state inside the public schools that would even kick you out of being able to get your school breakfast, your school lunch, be having a place with heat all day even, you know what I mean? And being with your peers and kick you out. And when we would go, there was a tremendous process that the Black Power Blueprint, Black Star Industries, and African People's Education and Defense Fund, the two partnering organizations of the Uhuru movement. There was a process they went to secure buildings. And we went through at least 90 buildings that are considered Land Reutilization Act, the LRA buildings that the city, as part of the gentrification, scooped up, and they sit empty, abandoned, and windows blown out. And what you saw in there was evidence of families that had to crawl in there at night to live. You saw broken baby carriages. You saw evidence of children living there, of diapers and, just things, because then they had to get out. And, and also in foster care, 41% of Black boys in foster care were suspended last year across the California public schools. And foster care, putting African children in foster care to begin with, is part of the violation of international law, removing children from their own group and putting them in another group. And that's part of these statistics from the article. And the attack on African family and African people is taking, and this Uhuru movement did a tremendous campaign for winning back Black children, exposing the genocide against the African family, and getting, exposing the foster care system in Alameda County, right there in Oakland. And the children in foster care receive harsher punishment, placing them at greater risk of dropping out, which we call pushed out of school, which puts them right on the track of increasing an economy that benefits us as white people, and it's called the prison economy. Uhuru.
Uhuru, yeah, really, really appreciate that. And we have some more
Yes. Okay.
things
So
to announce here.
we want to thank Kristen Forthen in Spokane, Washington, who donated $35 in reparations to the Black Power Blueprint, and $50 from James White, which brings us to $925.
Wow. Okay, we only need $75 more to
And we
get.
have a statement.
We have a statement.
James says, material support for all colonized people is a must. Uhuru.
Wow. James.
Yes.
Uhuru. Very, very exciting.
We're hoping to meet James at the USM convention.
Great.
And where is the USM convention?
Well, we'll
Go
get
ahead.
to that. Or
Well-
should I go now?
We'll get to that.
All right.
Okay. The USM convention will be in the new Uhuru House there in St. Louis, the Black Blueprint come to life. April 14th and 15th, we have the incredible honor of hosting our national convention, White Solidarity with Black Power, right in the halls of the new, shining, beautiful Uhuru House in St. Louis.
Uhuru. Well, just, as Kitty mentioned, the whole question of genocide under international law, I wanted to go over Article 2 of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide put together by the United Nations. And that happened in the 1940s after white people killed other white people in Europe under the Nazi regime. But the fact is that for all of the hundreds of years that Europeans were slaughtering by the hundreds of millions indigenous people, African people, the colonized peoples all around the world, all throughout the Americas, all throughout Africa, all throughout Asia, everywhere that the European colonizer went, there was death, rape, destruction, murder. People just lost a population of millions and millions and millions, sometimes in 20 years, in 50 years. But there was no word for genocide then. Genocide as a word was created only when white people killed other white people. And, as Jesse has put out, Jews did nothing, just stood by as Germany and France and Britain were slaughtering African people. So if you want to say something about that, and I want to go into the Genocide Convention as well.
Certainly. I really appreciate that this was brought up in this discussion because, people like myself who come from a Jewish background, but really the whole country, all white people, Europe, everything, grow up learning about the Holocaust, the European persecution of Jews in the 1940s, as the standard of human evil and violence against other human beings. And as you can see, that's even true according to the law, that they didn't even have a legal definition for the crime of genocide until white people did to another group of white people what white people as a whole had been doing to the rest of the planet for hundreds of years. So it's very clear that, the real Holocaust, you have Holocaust museums all over this country, but no Jew was put in a concentration camp in the United States of America. It was the indigenous people who had a Holocaust committed against them. It was African people who had a Holocaust, who we committed a Holocaust against. And, this definition of what happened to Jews in Europe as the Holocaust, as the genocide, was used to justify huge sums of money being paid in reparations from the German government and even from other governments and Swiss banks and all these different institutions that really ultimately went towards Israel and other, Jewish bourgeois organizations. So this was used to justify a perverse form of reparations, but the real genocide is being committed against African people. And that's why we can say without any hesitation that we owe reparations. The US, Europe, and every white power government on the planet and the general white population, including Jewish people, owe reparations to African people.
Yes. And thank you, Jesse, for really talking about that. And we only have $75 more before we get to our milestone.
Well, we do have $10 from Kyle Weiss in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Uhuru, Kyle. Well, we only have $65 more to get to our milestone, which will put us at $29,000 on our total you carrying, which is very exciting. And then we just have another $1,000 to get to $30,000. And that's where we have to keep going. And we do it with these, with these donations that people give, and it adds up, and it's really, really powerful. I just wanted to go over quickly while you're going ahead and getting out your debit card, your credit card, and going to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint to give $65 that we need right now. While you're doing that, you can listen to us talking about this, that the whole convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide in the United States was put together in the 1940s after the murder of of Jewish people, millions of Jewish people in Germany.
Mhm.
But as we said, did not mention, or nobody ever talked about the question of genocide. Genocide as a word was invented then. And it was described in the documents of the United States that the crime of genocide equals, I guess you would say, on a whole society level of what homicide is on a one-to-one. That it is killing a huge group of people, of one specific group of people. And it's saying that, though, you don't even have to murder and slaughter them, that there are conditions for what is called genocide that include several things. And that includes, I'm reading this from the convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. So you don't even have to kill all the people. You just be killing members of the group.
Mhm.
That happens to African people every 18 hours by the police, not to mention all of the other ways that the system very deviously sets up a colonial situation that pits African people against each other that results in homicide
Mhm.
to the benefit of white power. It includes causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Wow. I mean, there's so many statistics, and we could have a web event just on all the things that cause serious bodily and mental harm to African people, even the terror and the trauma that African people have gone through for the last 600 years, the lynchings, the rape, the torture, the things that white people have done and that the system has done and colonialism has done, results in what is called post-traumatic colonialism, syndrome that has been proven to be passed down from generation to generation in the DNA of African people. And the next one is deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. That is the conditions of African people. Here, next, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And that's something that when we talk about this 1.5 million African men of childbearing age who are, quote, missing because they're either dead or in prison, that is absolutely a deliberate method of calculating to bring about the physical destruction of the African population by, preventing births and inflicting these conditions upon the African community, and then imposing measures, intended to prevent births within the group, and finally, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And I think, as Kitty mentioned, that the foster care system that takes African children away from their parents and families and places them in white homes, that in itself violates this genocide convention. When under international law, a child of a given group has to stay within that group. That is mandated. So this is, the reality of the conditions of genocide that affect the African community. And do we have anything else to announce? Or can you give us a total?
Our total at this time is $935.
So we only need $65 more dollars. Go ahead and put that in. Two people could give $32.50.
Yep.
You could give $32.50 at youcaring.com/Black Power Group. Put that in and bring us to $29,000 total that we will have raised on this amazing You Caring fundraiser that we've been doing to return stolen resources to African people for self-determination through the Black Power Blueprint. Yes, Ticharwa, I would like to ask you if you have any other words that you would like to give us tonight from St. Louis. We're here in San Francisco. If you have any things that you want to say to the people watching tonight, Uhuru. Can you hear me? Uhuru.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. I just wanted to say, first of all, that what we're calling the Black Power Blueprint is the work of an organization that has a 45-plus year history.
Yes.
We have a long history of building Black Power Blueprint-like institutions as well. That includes 2 furniture stores, one in Oakland, California, one in Philadelphia. We built a gym that we named after an African that was murdered by the state, Tyron Lewis. We built African markets in various places throughout the country. We have a newspaper that's been in publication for nearly 45 years. We have a publishing company. We have a radio station. So you have an organization with a long 45-year plus track record of building economic self-determined institutions for African people, for African liberation. And this is what you're contributing to. This is not Black Wall Street. This is not just the organization that goes out and engages in a bunch of marches that don't lead you anywhere. We don't just read books and celebrate Black holidays and go see pyramids. We are an organization that is engaged in the liberation of African people.
Yes.
And for those who, that we've discussed the role of white people in this process, you're not looking at, some attempted integration. I heard one person say when he saw some white people working with us, this is not integration. I like Penny, I like Kitty, they're fine people, but they serve as children of the slave owners, the slave masters, who have decided to reject colonialism and who are working to provide material solidarity for a liberation struggle.
Yeah.
So, we're just calling on people to stop fighting for a place in the social system. African people, North Americans, stop fighting for a place in this social system. This article proves that even if you have a future in this lifetime, you cannot ever guarantee under any circumstances with any reasonable assurance that your children will ever have a future in this world, anywhere in this world. So we're just calling on you to make a practical contribution by providing $10, providing $1,000, whatever you can contribute. Give until it hurts. And then figure out a way, if you live locally in St. Louis, that you can contribute to this project. Because oftentimes we can't really see history as it is being made. But this is a part of history, and you should not let it pass you by.
Uhuru, very powerful and eloquent words. I really appreciate that, Ticharwa, and unite with that. I also wanted to add that people, and we don't say this enough, that people can join this work. There are many different fronts of the Black Power Blueprint. There's the actual work of renovation and so many community volunteers that are going on in St. Louis. We also have what we call the Black Power Blueprint Reparations campaign that organizes these web events every week and does a lot of Facebook and social media work. We need you if you want to be on the ground. Also, Uhuru Foods and Pies, especially here in Oakland, is a very critical part of the Black Power Blueprint. And that's been on the ground here, as Ticharwa was talking about, since the early 80s. And every year we have a huge, incredible pie campaign. This year we have committed to sell 10,000 pies to raise resources for the Black Power Blueprint. If there's any way that you want to work with the Uhuru Foods and Pies, if you're in the Bay Area, if you are not, you can still work with the Uhuru Foods and Pies. And then there's also, of course, the front of a Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which Justin talked about that. But if there's any front of this work at all, and we are working hard to make this happen, that you want to join, you can go to join@blackpowerblueprint.org. Join@blackpowerblueprint.org and email us, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Any skills that you have, yes, turn them over and join this work. That would be really, really powerful. So we just have $65 more. Now, there's about 40 people on this, viewing this right now. That would only mean what, like $2.50 each if everybody put it in?
Everybody did.
Yeah, $2. That's right. $2. Or somebody could just, save all that work of everybody
Right.
going to youcaring.com and just put in the $65 right now that we need. 2 people could put in $32.50. It's just, let's go ahead and make our goal. Let's go ahead and get there. Let's do it. And we want to have a victory. We want to have a victory tonight. We want somebody to put in $64 and go ahead and make our goal. And that is youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint. So anybody have any last words before we go? We have an event here right where we are tonight with the tour. We're going to be talking to people here in San Francisco about the Black Power Blueprint. So we're just have a lot to do today, and it's very exciting.
Can I go into this?
Yes.
Okay. So crew, everyone. Well, as you are going to youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint to get us to our goal tonight of $1,000. Actually, it was $2,000. We want to get to that milestone of $1,000, which brings the overall fundraiser to $29,000. youcaring.com/blackpowerblueprint. If everyone on here donated $2 each, even if you've already donated, go donate another $2. If everyone did that, we would surpass our goal. So before I get to these announcements, we do have a question. Why is it called the Black Power Blueprint? Wondering if we want to address
that. Ticharwa, I wanted to ask you, I see somebody on the chat is saying, Winston Chan, he's saying, why is it called Black Power Blueprint? Could you address that, Ticharwa?
Penny, thank you very much. The reason why it's called the Black Power Blueprint, let's reference the article. What the real question at the center of all of these facts given is a question of power. It is power that will allow us to control the destiny and daily lives of African people. Only power. It's not a question of overturning racism and trying to get people to think differently about us. And then it's not just creating some economic enclave that does not overturn the plantation. The only way that we can guarantee a future for our children is to have power over our own lives. So that is the basic reason why it's called Black Power. But we also understand that this system, social system that we live within, that we refer to as capitalism, it was born as a world social system on the backs of African and other oppressed people. And this is the struggle that we are engaged in. It's an anti-colonial struggle in which the oppressed people have to have power over their own lives. So that's why we call it Black Power. And we call it a blueprint because we are actually laying the groundwork for African people to learn how to govern again. So this whole process, somebody told me the other day, you don't realize it, but you're a developer. But we are developers, but we're developing in the interest of the African working class. Yeah. And we'll be able to take this model that we have where we go to people through these webinars and these events that we organize and have dedicated ourselves to making happen every day, every week. We'll be able to replicate that. We'll be able to take the lessons that we learn and reconstructing and renovating this Hoover house that was dilapidated and abandoned for 12 years. We'll know how to replicate that. We'll learn how, and we have processes. So my point is that this is African people learning how to govern so that we can seize power over our own lives. And this is a blueprint by which to make that happen. So you should donate to this. The person who asked that question, you should donate. That is why you are supporting the struggle for an oppressed people to overturn that relationship, to have power of their own lives.
Uhuru. Thank you.
Uhuru, Penny.
Uhuru.
I just wanted to salute Ticharwa for profound statements and just call on white people. We're talking about $65 more that we need to hit the 1,000 benchmark, but we need 1,065 to meet our goals tonight and to meet the goals of the project, because these are not projects that are being funded by government money, by the ward leaders, by the city funds, even demolishing of 2 buildings that can't be saved, that are totally condemned next door to open up the land for a marketplace, one African, one nation marketplace. You know, it's within the power of the city to do that, but they don't do that. They don't use the funds for genuine economic development for the African community at all. And we have the funds in the white community. We have 22% more assets than the African community. And when they add up assets, they actually even add up if you have a newspaper or a magazine in your house. To have it, you know, $4 to get a magazine, you know, that's considered excess money. We have it. This is reparations is actually the way that we change our relationship economically and politically to the African community. And we have the social wealth. That's what this article showed over and over again. Africans don't, even if they end up in the higher echelons of the economy, they never have the social wealth to pass down to their children upon generations. And we are living on the social wealth that was created from the theft of every resource of Africa. We can't ignore that. You go into the beautiful Aquaba Hall and you see a heating system or air conditioning system. It's aluminum. That came out of Ghana. That's where that aluminum came from, Ghana. All the resources that have benefited us come out of the ground in Africa and come from African labor and indigenous labor. And the Uhuru movement says this is the house that Black built. African and Mexican labor built the entire thing. And all of these contractors and beautifully skilled tradespeople are giving the best bids. They are lowering, they're contributing, they are donating. We have businesses that are donating. We have the painters union that donated. And, you know, we have a truckload of office furniture coming. A semi-truck with donated office furniture is arriving on Tuesday, the 27th. If you live in St. Louis, we need all hands on deck. We have to unload it within 3 hours. This is what's happening now. People see this positive future, something being built right in the heartland of the U.S. African-led, African labor is profound. We can be part of it through reparations. Please, anonymous, whatever, go on. Let's make the goal. This is nothing. We have to buy 4 more doors for the upstairs. We're just culminating the entire project. The resources go directly to what's needed. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Ticharwa, and thank you, Kitty. It's very, very inspiring. And Bakri Olatunji.
Uhuru. I really want to appreciate the comrades in St. Louis, Ticharwa and Kitty. Thank you guys. I've learned so much about St. Louis. I didn't know much about St. Louis living in Oakland, but what I've learned from St. Louis, not just from this webinar, but from being there in St. Louis. And I think we share a lot with what's happening to Africans in Oakland, California. I really want to thank everybody who's given tonight. Everybody's given generously. They brought us on the threshold of this milestone that we're about to make, because I know before we get off the air, we're going to make this milestone and make it 29,000. I really particularly want to thank the North Americans or the white population, because we haven't talked about charity, and this is not a discussion about charity. This is a discussion of material solidarity, a discussion about reparations, a struggle about repairing the damage that's been done to African people at the hands of the North American state and the North American population. And I think that's important. But I really want to talk and appeal to the Africans. I don't know how many of the 33 viewers that we have right now are African, but I do want to say that I want to call to the African people to give tonight. We must invest in our future. Black Power Blueprint is an anti-colonial project. It's not about racism. It's about power in our own hands to make sure that anyone with racist thoughts does not hurt us anymore. We need for you to go to youcaring.com Black Power Blueprint. For African people, it's an investment in our future that we are leading. And I'm gonna repeat that again. It's an investment in our future that we are leading and creating. And that's fundamentally important. That reunites us as one African people. It lets us protect and nurture our children, our fathers, and our mothers. This is the only future for us. So please give tonight, and let's raise the necessary resources to move this project forward and turn history right side up. Uhuru.
Uhuru. That was very beautiful and inspiring, Bakri. Thank you. And I think we have an announcement.
We have a very exciting announcement. We have received, towards the Black Power Blueprint, a $65 donation from the one and only, or maybe not the one and only, Anonymous.
Oh,
Anonymous.
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 You have really taken a stand of reparations tonight, Anonymous. Really salute you.
Salute Anonymous. And also, I guess you can't really salute Anonymous. And also, Casey Mackey also donated an additional $5, which brings us to $1,005.
We raised tonight. That puts us at $29,005. Uhuru. We're going to get to 30,000. When you're off air, just go ahead and put that 1,000 in. Put that $995 in, so we can get to $30,000. But right now, we did make a powerful milestone, and I want to really thank Ticharwa, Masimba. Wow, it was so powerful what you were talking about tonight. I want to thank Bakri Olatunji, who's here with us in San Francisco right now. That was powerful, talking about San Quentin and his work as a medical worker in the prisons and how it politicized him. And I want to thank Comrade Kitty Riley out there in St. Louis. Also, Casey Mackey, who's doing the technical end of this. Our comrade Kyle Weiss, and Jesse and Jackson, who's texting us all the numbers of people who are giving, and everybody, Virginia Wilson, who's really helped build this online and help really build these events, and just so many different comrades who have put in the time and the work to build this solidarity movement that's paying reparations in a real concrete way to African people who are changing the world by seizing the stolen resources into their own hands and creating a beautiful world in which all human beings can live. So I want to thank everybody who gave tonight. Wow, we did it. You are amazing. We love you. We appreciate you. We got to $1,005, and that brings us to $29,000 tonight. That's really moving, really powerful. I love you all. We want to say Uhuru.
Uhuru.
We want to say unity through
Reparations.
Uhuru. Until next week. Save your money.
Yes.
We'll be back. Uhuru. Until
Uhuru.
victory is won, the party is winning. Forward to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru.
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 Right.
Oh my God, that was.
No, I wish I'd gone. I was taking some Instagram stories on the Black Power Blueprint Instagram. I missed that one.
Oh no, it was a great.
So you need to make it. I will make a clip of it later on.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll make it good.
good. Really, really good. Oh,
Yeah, we're so Here's all.